The following is an audio version of my latest video podcast series, the CyberCast podcast, with my special guest host and cybersecurity expert, Mike Echols. You can catch the full video version by going to Fletch.tv and then clicking on the link to my YouTube channel in the top banner. Thanks so much for listening. Enjoy the podcast. Have a great day. Hi, I'm Mark Fletcher. I'm Vice President of Public Safety Solutions at 911 Inform. Welcome to this episode of the CyberCast podcast. As we roll out next-generation 911 services, we're enabling a level of interconnectivity between citizens and public safety that's never existed before. While we're opening up a broad new communications path, we're also increasing the cyber attack phase of our nation's emergency services IP network. Joining me on this new podcast series is Michael Echols, CEO of Max Cybersecurity. Michael's a true student of the industry, spending 3/4 of a decade at the Department of Homeland Security, where he led the President's National Telecom Security Advisory Council, or NSTAC. So join us as we dive into what's really important on our nation's next-generation 911 network. Hey, it's Fletch. Joining me today is Mike Echols. Now, I've been wanting to do this podcast series for a while on cybersecurity. I am no cyber expert, so I thought I would kill two birds in one stone. I thought I would bring in the guy that I know knows this like the back of his hand, and maybe I could learn something at the same time. So welcome, Mike Echols, who's the CEO of Max Cybersecurity and former DHS employee, and was on the President's NSTAC, ran the President's NSTAC. That's where I first met him. Mike, thanks so much for joining me on this podcast.
Thank you, buddy. Any opportunity that we get to help people understand the threat and how those vulnerabilities can be exercised, then we take it. So glad to be here.
Absolutely. So the digital world is radically changing, right? We have been, when you and I first met, next generation 911 was a real thing, but I think it was still a bit of a dream. We all sat down in that first meeting and we started saying, all right, what do we got to work with? How are we going to build it? What kind of Pandora's box are we opening? Well, the digital world is here. There's no denying. What did we create by accident here?
So, we were looking at things like going from IPv4 to IPv6 and having enough capacity. And we were looking at things from a government perspective. And a government perspective is adoption and not killing the economy and assuring that there is reliability. And so the government's doing its part, but then private sector is in business to what? Make money.
Make money,
right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And so what tended to happen is we start to put those things in place and those government domains that they're responsible for, and you start to look at industry, what they will do because of what they can profit from, because obviously you're in business to make money, and you tend to come up with a gap in the middle. There's no peace in the middle where there's an arbiter who is making sure that everything is aligned to not only meet the requirements of both sides, but to assure that our path forward is a prudent one.
Well, I think, and what's really critical when we're dealing with next generation 911 networks and services, we're dealing with people's lives, right? So it's not just I'm looking to protect my ATM pin so my bank account doesn't get drained. Yeah, that's terrible, and it's certainly an inconvenience and certainly a cyber threat. But when you're dealing with the next generation 911 network, you're literally dealing with the lives and livelihood of America's public safety and America's public. You could really do some collateral damage. So you've got to protect that. And I think it's important that we not only take a stance to be protective, but we have to get that fine balance to expand the boundaries a little bit into some unknown areas where you've got to take a little bit of a calculated risk, no?
Sure. So all technologies especially at this moment, that are introduced into our society, create a seam between what we were doing in a legacy basis and what we hope to do going forward. And so you spoke about us taking that chance. And that seam is where the chance is, but it's also the place that some very brilliant hackers find their opportunity, right? It's that jumping from one side of the bridge to the other before we make that piece that connects them. And we have some solid foundation. We typically are, kind of taking some great life or death chances. One of the issues that we will constantly face is that cyber protection is in its infancy. And I say that because we don't have national foundations for that. In my book, Secure Cyber Life, The Government's Not Coming to Save You, it wasn't a knock on government. It was to help people understand that there is a role of government, right? They have a specific role that they've cut out for themselves. And in that role, it is not set to protect every individual and every individual's life in every small community across the country. It just does not work like that.
I think the days of old where security through obscurity are long gone. And, the hackers have become a lot smarter. We got away with that for a long, long time, though. And that mindset is pretty sunken in, I think, at some high levels.
Yeah, I think that we learn through observation, and we make decisions about where we're going to spend the next dollar on security based on observation, not necessarily based on research. So we are a very proactive cyber society. That's our issue. What that means is, we're talking next generation 911. So let's look at an emergency situation. What that means is a certain amount of people have to be killed in that intersection by being hit by a motor vehicle before we put a traffic light there.
Right.
That's the society we live in, right? So there's almost an expectation that something bad will happen. And to take it further, we may not even see action until something really bad happens.
So is that a failure in society?
So that is a great question, because I always encourage organizations and people to, one, take advantage of all the services that the government offers. They have lots of things they're developing, and they are great, great products, risk assessments, those types of things. But I also encourage them to speak up. In the particular situation of cyber, we're talking next generation 911. We don't even get to that level, because just basic cybersecurity, the majority of people don't understand. I always tell cyber professionals when I'm giving speeches, which just makes them gasp, that cybersecurity is a buzzword. Cybersecurity is the amalgamation of all the things that make up what we call cybersecurity: training, detection, identification, remediation. All those things are cybersecurity. But cybersecurity is actually risk management. The issue in a free society where we lack standards is that we get to make those decisions ourselves. And the way that I may see risk is not the way that you choose to see risk, right? And I like to use very simple analogies to help people understand. On Facebook, if there was a picture of you with no shirt on, you may not care. It's not a big deal to you. If there was a picture of me with no shirt on Facebook. I may think that my life is coming to an end. It may be enough for me for someone to use uh, to sort of bribe me for funds based on the fact that I'm mortified about that. And so we all look at this world very differently. And until we create that baseline of what we believe to be true, we're going to continue to have cyber issues.
I might let a picture of me on Facebook without my shirt on, just so I would collect money from people. Say, take it down. Here's $20.
That's fun.
Are we putting our way of life at risk with all of this?
Absolutely.
I mean,
so you were talking about the country, the nation. When we say our way of life, what we're really talking about is democracy, right? Democracy is this idea that we have freedoms, right? Freedom of speech, freedom of movement. You know, TSA's motto is the free movement of people and goods, right? It's this idea of freedom, right? And so with this cyber thing, we fail to put guardrails in place because we don't want to infringe on those freedoms. However, by not putting those guardrails in place, we are dooming our freedom.
Explain that.
The way that all of our systems work, whether it's the court system, whether it's medical systems, and many other things, is we look at chain of custody, for instance, right? With a digital or cyber attack or some type of exploit, you mess with the definition of cybersecurity. And a definition of cybersecurity is CIA: confidentiality, integrity, and access. In the old days, hackers would try to interfere with your access. They would take down things, right? Then they quickly realized that, why would we take down things? That's our highway, right? That's our access to the individuals we want to take things from so that we can make money from it or we can gain power from it. So this sort of the accessibility piece came off the table. And so then it became the confidentiality and the integrity, right? We want to know that a document that we put in a system has not changed. We want to know that information that we're receiving from an official source, whether it's government or whether it's a sworn person, like when a attorney is sworn or a doctor is sworn and they take an oath. We want to understand that what we are getting from them is actually what they said, and it's based on fact. Here's the problem. This ever expanding digital world is making it cheaper for us to do things, right? Again, I want to keep it very simple. It's making it easier for us and more efficient for us to make money. It's making it easier and more efficient for us to get tasks done. In doing that, we are putting our trust in ones and zeros, in digital systems. We have now gotten to the point where hackers have figured out how to dip into those digital systems and make what comes out on the other end not what was put in at the beginning, which means that the integrity and the confidentiality of those systems are being exploited. We don't have an answer for that. You know, a lot of companies will come out and tell you every time there's an exploit, there's a new company. They stand up and they tell you that we can solve this issue. We don't have an answer for that at a national level.
You know, it's interesting. My father, who was born in 1921, He's passed away, oh gosh, more than 10 years ago now. Very smart man, an incredibly smart business person. But because of when he was born and when he grew up, he never was exposed to the electronic media that exists today or that existed 10, 15 years ago, even. And as smart as he was one of the early people who was scammed by folks claiming they're the prince of whatever and there's funds locked away. And just with a laser printer, someone was able to present to him a document that looked incredibly official that you and I would laugh at today. But to him at that time, and having never been exposed to that technology, totally was taken in and potentially almost lost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And thank God we got the FBI to step in and get that back. But today I'm reading articles on deep fakes on the internet and the video manipulation. We're getting into a really, really dangerous place where I consider myself a relatively smart guy. But I'm looking at some of this stuff and I'm thinking, if I'm not careful, I could get fooled by that. That's a concern. And now when we look at next generation 911 and opening up an IP connection from the world into public safety, I got to tell you, Mike, it scares the hell out of me.
So the protection of local communities was simply based on the fact that they're local communities, right? This beautiful palette that we have in this country where we have a federal government, and then we have local governments, and then we have these local municipalities, and those local municipalities can choose to work with each other or not with each other, support each other. And then we have a national response system where the federal government can come in and help you if you have certain types of issues. It is a beautiful system, right? And what this cyber thing is doing is it's giving the world, whether it's a nation state or an individual in a third world country, access to that local municipality. And they're doing it across national networks. And I have to digress a moment to say that when I was managing the President's NSAT, National Security Telecommunications Advisory Committee, and it's made up of up to 30 CEOs from comms, IT, and defense. One of the recommendations that they had at one point, about 8 years ago, was that we need a centralized approach to cybersecurity. And they were talking about a federalized approach. And, that type of thing scares people. But when it comes to cybersecurity, I think it becomes a really important step forward. And the reason is there are a host of different types of exploits, right? You mentioned one, deep fakes. Deep fake is artificial intelligence that allows you to take, for instance, a video of you sitting there talking to me and make you appear to say things you did not say using your voice, right? And so that's one type of exploit, but it has a potential to affect national security. Now, if we take 100 other exploits, Congress, user groups, technologists, they talk about these things in silos, right? There'll be a group that will talk about artificial intelligence. There will be a group that will talk about a type of exploit where they're doing a man in the middle. We need to view these things holistically. Now, some people would say that CISA, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency at Infrastructure Security Agency at DHS, that's their responsibility. But their responsibility is so broad that it covers risk management, natural CBNRE, chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and cyber. We need at a national level a federalized approach to understanding the threats and where we need to go as a nation, because we will always leave out the opportunity to thwart some of these exploits that could be the one that brings us down.
Great topic. It's this is going to be a very interesting series. The more I talk to you, the more I realize that I picked the right guy to have these discussions with. I think we set the stage for a very interesting series. I'd like to talk about, on our next one, I'd like to talk about the systems that are in place in our democracy and the challenges that they create for chain of custody, chain of care, for all of the information that were created. Where do you see that going in a nutshell without giving away what we're going to talk about next time?
I think that a great analogy to the next generation 911 condition that we may be facing is our response to the pandemic and how we used computers and electrical system to help us solve some of these problems. What happens is we do whatever we need to do in that moment, which makes perfect sense. Of course, right? Pandemic, it could kill us. But we never go back. We never go back. Meaning that all the information that's been collected, meaning that all of the communications and cell phone and technology companies who now have access to the various parts of our lives, that may not ever be rescinded. Which begs the question, are we really free?
Interesting. Very interesting. Mike Echols, he's CEO of Max Cybersecurity. Mike, where can people get a hold of you to get more information, and where can they get your book?
Sure. The book is on Amazon, Secure Cyber Life. The government's not coming to save you. And you can always reach me for a spirited conversation on LinkedIn. And additionally, you can reach me directly at mechols@maxcybersecurity.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for offering to sit down with me and talk about this. This is going to be an interesting series of podcasts, and we'll catch everyone next week with a little more deep dive into the world of cyber. You've been listening to the CyberCast podcast. I'm Mark Fletcher, Vice President of Public Safety Solutions at 911 Informed. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter at Fletch911 and check out the rest of my blogs and podcasts at Fletch.tv. My co-host on this series is Michael Echols, CISSP and MBA. Mike's the CEO and founder of Max Cybersecurity, www.maxcybersecurity.com. Thanks again for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you next week.